Take your shirt off after scoring a goal, and the referee reaches for a yellow card before you've even finished celebrating. Most fans assume that's about decency, some kind of unwritten rule about respect, or maybe just FIFA being uptight. It's not. The rule exists because of time. Nothing more poetic than that. A player running around shirtless eats up seconds, and somewhere in the early 2000s, football's lawmakers decided those seconds mattered enough to legislate against. It was never about your body, it was about the clock. Which is a strange place to start a story about banned celebrations. Because if that's not really about decency, then what is football actually trying to control? That question is the whole video. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. There is no official list of banned celebrations. No rulebook chapter titled, Things You Cannot Do After Scoring. What exists instead is a patchwork. Fines here, suspensions there, warnings issued after the fact, decided case by people trying to protect something that's never quite named out loud. So let's look at what actually gets punished, and what that punishment is really protecting. Start with provocation. In 2009, Emmanuel Adebayor scored for Manchester City against his old club Arsenal, and instead of celebrating near his own teammates, he sprinted the entire length of the pitch to celebrate directly in front of the Arsenal supporters who used to chant his name. It nearly caused a riot. Objects were thrown. Stewards had to intervene. Adebayor wasn't punished for scoring. He was punished for where he chose to stand. And that idea, that location and audience matter more than the act itself, goes back even further. In 1999, Raúl scored against Barcelona and put a finger to his lips, silencing the crowd at Camp Nou in one gesture. No suspension, no fine, just a moment that's been replayed for 25 years as one of football's most iconic provocations. So provocation isn't new. What's changed is how nervous football has become about what provocation might set off. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because if you assume punishment scales with how bad the celebration looks, you're about to be wrong. In 2018, the Fenerbahce striker Fernandao celebrated a goal with an obscene pelvic thrust gesture, one he'd actually copied from a celebration that had already caused a mass brawl back in Brazil. He was hit with a 2-match suspension and a fine of 60,000 Turkish lira, later reduced to 1 match on appeal, but still an actual ban from playing. That same year at the World Cup, 2 Swiss players did something that, on the surface, looks far less crude. Xhaka and Xhaka and Shaqiri scored against Serbia and celebrated by forming the shape of a double-headed eagle with their hands, a symbol tied to Albanian identity. No suspension. Shaqiri and Xhaka were fined 10,000 Swiss francs each. Their captain, Stefan Lichtsteiner, who joined in, was fined 5,000. Sit with that for a second. A crude sexual gesture got a player banned from playing football. A symbolic hand gesture at the biggest tournament on earth got a fine you could pay out of a single matchday wage. If punishment was really about how offensive something looks, that comparison shouldn't exist. Which means punishment isn't really about how offensive something looks. It's about something else. And to understand what, you have to understand why that eagle mattered in the first place. Shaqiri and Xhaka were both born to Kosovar Albanian families. Serbia's relationship with Kosovo is not just political history, it's recent, raw, and still unresolved for millions of people. When 2 players with that heritage scored against Serbia at a World Cup and made that gesture in front of a global audience, it stopped being a football celebration in about half a second. FIFA investigated it as a political statement. Political symbols are explicitly prohibited inside stadiums. That part of the rulebook is real and specific, unlike most of what we've covered so far. But Shaqiri didn't see it that way. Asked about it afterward, he said simply, "It's just emotion." He added, "In football, you have always emotions, and that's the collision right there. A player experiencing the most personal moment of his career, scoring for his country against the team his family's homeland has history with, describing it as pure feeling. And an institution, terrified of being seen as taking a side in a geopolitical conflict, processing that same moment as a liability to be fined and filed away. Nobody in that moment was lying. Shaqiri probably did feel pure emotion. FIFA probably did feel genuine alarm. That's what makes it the most honest example in this entire story. 2 completely sincere reactions to the exact same 5 seconds of football, arriving at completely opposite conclusions. So go back to the shirt. Go back to Adebayor sprinting the length of a pitch. Go back to Fernandau's suspension and the Albanian Eagles' fine. None of these were ever really about the gesture. They were about what the gesture threatened to represent. Wasted time, crowd violence, obscenity, or a conflict football desperately wants to stay outside of. The bigger the meaning behind a celebration, the more nervous the institution gets. Not louder punishment. Quieter, more careful punishment. Because you can fine a symbol. You can't really erase one. Here's the detail that makes the whole thing almost funny, in a dark way. The actual football world never banned the shush celebration, the one Raúl made famous. It's still legal right now, this weekend, in any match you watch. EA Sports banned it first. In their FIFA video game, the shush and AOK celebrations were removed after players complained they'd become tools for taunting and harassment online. Think about that. A video game studio moved faster to protect people's feelings than the actual sport ever did. So if you came into this expecting a list of football's wildest, funniest, most outrageous celebrations, you got one. But underneath it is something football has never quite admitted out loud. It isn't trying to ban celebrations, it's trying to ban meaning. It wants the emotion of the goal without the history the player carries into it, without the rivalry behind it, without the identity that made the moment matter in the first place. And it can't have that. Because the player crossing half a pitch to celebrate or making a shape with his hands in front of millions was never performing for the cameras. He was just being human, for 5 seconds, in front of the whole world. And football has spent decades trying to find that out of existence. It never has, and it never will.